Hello and welcome to RadioTimes.com's review of Queen Charlotte, A Bridgerton Story on Netflix. I'm Morgan, drama writer here at RadioTimes.com.
And I'm Abby, drama editor here at RadioTimes.com. And today we're going to be getting into all of the subject matter, the twists, the turns of Queen Charlotte. So first things first, let's have a brief overview of what the show is actually about. So it does exactly what it says on the tin. It is about Queen Charlotte from Bridgerton. It's her story, how she came to be queen, how she came to meet King George, how their union was formed, and the tumultuous nature of their relationship, which we're going to get into later on, the struggles, their trials, their tribulations. It's really dark, actually, and very, very sad. Again, we'll get onto that later. And it's their story with some other characters, Lady Danbury, Violet Bridgerton, weaved in as well. So lots to get into. Morgan, I'm really keen to hear your overall thoughts. What did you think of Queen Charlotte?
I think ultimately it's so much more of a better, more thoughtful and thought-provoking series than Bridgerton. I think Bridgerton definitely scratches that particular itch when it comes to period dramas, steamy romance, like unguessable romantic plot lines. But I feel like Queen Charlotte, A Bridgerton Story gives us the kind of prequel that we want about such an iconic and beloved character as Queen Charlotte. But also, like you said, it's thought-provoking, it's really meaty in the kinds of plot lines it explores. And also the young cast are just absolutely phenomenal at portraying the younger versions of Lady Danbury, Queen Charlotte, King George, and also others.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you just said. I really, really enjoyed this show. I thought it was a brilliant piece of telling and much better than Bridgerton. I watched the first season of Bridgerton, thought it was okay, but it didn't speak to me. It didn't draw me in the way that Queen Charlotte did. This had so much soul. It was incredibly tender and moving in a way that I felt that Bridgerton wasn't. It didn't quite go deep enough for me in terms of that. I thought the cast were phenomenal. I think when you consider the young Queen Charlotte and then the older version of the character, who we see in this as well as in Bridgerton, I just thought there was a really consistent through line there. You could see why they had cast India as Queen Charlotte. I thought she really captured the spirit and the regalness of the older Queen Charlotte. The same with young Lady Danbury as well. I thought you could see the through line there. And I just thought it had so much to say, which we'll get onto. I just thought it was nuanced and, as you said, thought-provoking, and it did so much with difficult subject matter really, really well. So yeah, big fans of Queen Charlotte.
I think the first thing to obviously address with the series is the fact that the series at the heart of it is a love story between Queen Charlotte and King George III. We kind of meet King George as he's recently come to the throne. We see him and his mother, and she really does pull and call the shots in his life, including setting up this arranged marriage with Queen Charlotte. We meet Queen Charlotte as she's on her way from her small German provincial town to Great Britain with her older brother. And she's basically just kind of like the typical teenage girl, isn't she? She's funny, she's humorous, she's witty, and she's also terribly sarcastic. Yeah. And she's kind of very confused at why she's being taken to the UK to marry this unknown stranger. And we obviously have that kind of iconic scene where she's trying to climb a wall to try and find out what her husband supposedly looks like, and he kind of comes up behind her, and that's when they meet.
It's first meeting.
It's like something out of a rom-com.
It's so well done. It's so well done. I thought that moment was excellent, and he again is just not what you expect him to be. The show, there are so many unexpected moments. You're envisaging one thing, and then it turns out to be something else entirely. And that moment, I just couldn't take my eyes off it. I was smiling. I just felt my heart it was just, I loved it. I thought it was really well executed.
Yeah, and I think their chemistry on screen is so palpable, but it's all very sweet. It's all very whereas Bridgerton's very steamy and hot and heavy, with Queen Charlotte it's all very sweet and thoughtful, and you can kind of see the budding romance between the pair as soon as they meet. And then we obviously have their wedding, and going forward their relationship is really one that is underlined by their love for each other more than anything. Even though it is an arranged marriage, it's something that is always underlined by their passion for each other and also their duty in providing an heir for the crown as well.
And that never wavers, even in the most difficult moments. And I think that's why you really root for them. You want them to succeed. And as we see George's mental health deteriorating, we see the full spectrum of what that means for him and for her. Your heart is breaking for them, because without that, they would be so solid. They would be such a powerful, strong couple. But obviously, this huge hurdle which they're not able to overcome, because as we see, right up until the end, that remains there simply because of the time in which they live. There isn't medication. There isn't even the language for this. To be able to manage that situation is so difficult for them. And I think that is such an important part of this story, because you root for them even more with that challenge thrown into the mix. How did you think the show handled the portrayal of George's worsening mental health?
I think, like you said, it was really harrowing. In those scenes, it was almost like a dark thriller. It was really unlike something you would expect to see in the Bridgerton universe. It was very much like primarily those scenes were set in the dingy, dark depths of the palace's basement and cellars. It was all very hush-hush. Even so, towards Queen Charlotte, she didn't know the extent of what was going on to her husband. And I feel like those scenes did such a good job of chronicling the attitudes towards mental health at that time and showing the lengths that people would go to, people in positions of power that maybe perhaps they would go to at the time in order to conceal those kinds of quote-unquote secrets within their own personal lives. I think also just seeing Corey's performance as the young King George in that was really phenomenal, because he was ultimately being tortured in order to try and overcome this mysterious illness that people didn't really realise the extent of.
And I think in another pair of hands, it could have been a ridiculous performance. It could have been clownish and caricaturish, and you just wouldn't have bought it. But it was so authentic. He really did make me believe that he was on the brink and heading into a very dark place. I think he did such a great job. I haven't seen him in anything before, and his CV is pretty concise. He's only done maybe one or two other things, but I think he's going to be getting a lot of, his agent's going to be very busy going forward, because it was a really magnificent performance. And really, really well handled. Also, we see lots from Lady Danbury, young Lady Danbury in this series. It kind of jumps back between the two, but we do see her as a young woman, and you were saying that you really enjoyed what that character brought to this story.
I'd say she's one of my favourites in this series. I think she ultimately, we see the journey of Agatha Danbury from being Agatha Danbury to Lady Danbury. And we see that, obviously, like you mentioned, we have scenes with the older Lady Danbury, who is played by Adjuando, but also with us, Emma Thomas. She plays a brilliant young Agatha Danbury, who we meet in this, again, it's another arranged marriage scenario with a much older man, loveless. And parts of that are humorous in the way that she has come to deal with this loveless marriage. She's got some certain people around her that keep everything quite lighthearted and quite comedic, but ultimately she's stuck in a house with a husband that she doesn't like and she doesn't love. And ultimately we also see her journey. So as Queen Charlotte becomes queen and the cogs of aristocracy start turning, also to do the fact that a lot more black people get put up into high positions of aristocracy. And Lady Danbury and Lord Danbury are two of those people that somewhat benefit from it. They're brought up to Lord and Ladyship titles. And within that, we also see how they get to move about these previously more, segregated parts of society. And now Lady Danbury is, au fait with these other people. She's also, more closer to actually Queen Charlotte herself, and the pair obviously become friends. But within that, we also see how she uses her new position of authority and power to her advantage, and how also ultimately she has come from a family of power as well. That is something that is ignored as she's moved over to Great Britain.
The moment with her son when she talks about the tribe in Sierra Leone, I thought it was quick.
So powerful.
Blink and you'll miss it, but it was such a brilliant detail. This is where we come from, which was amazing. Also, she has such weight on her shoulders because she has the black community turn up at her door and say, what are you going to do for us? Our position is in threat now. Are you going to help us? Are you going to deliver? She has so much to manage.
So much to manage. And I think on top of that also is obviously, I think the series is also underlined by this sense of duty that a lot of wives have at the time of producing heirs and being well spoken and dressing the part and attending balls. But also these are all events that previously Lady Danbury wasn't even part of, and also Queen Charlotte. So it's almost nice seeing the both of them enter this high society together and being like a shoulder to lean on for each other within that as well.
Yeah. Also with Lady Danbury, we see with the older Lady Danbury and Violet Bridgerton as well, who returns. We've had conversations about mature women talking about their sexual needs, which is particularly within a period drama, that's revolutionary, right? We didn't get any of that in Bridgerton. We've seen so much of that here. The fact that just because, you know, you turn 40, 50, 60, 70, your desires don't suddenly shut up shop and stop. And after your husband dies, why can't you love again, live again and be happy? How did you think that was handled?
I thought it was just so refreshing because, like you said, in Bridgerton, realistically, the focal point of Bridgerton are Violet's children. And in this series, while it's not a massive talking point of the series, it's such an important theme within it, which is showing, you know, sexuality in older women and how those conversations are approached and how they're understood. And we get to see Violet being unapologetic in her needs and not being the kind of woman and like archetypal widow that all of a sudden those kinds of needs just vanish. And I think seeing those conversations on screen between her and Lady Danbury were really hilarious, but also so important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's something for everyone in this show. I really think it does a good job of speaking to all those different elements. And I thought, again, that was a really, really important aspect of the show. And also something that I think Queen Charlotte does much better than Bridgerton is queer representation as well.
Definitely.
And we see that with Brimsley and Reynolds, who were the two confidants to the Queen and the King, and their relationship and their dynamic. And initially it's rooted in, there's so much tension there and almost aggression and nitpicking, but then they're behind closed doors, they're tearing one another's clothes off and enjoying baths together. But also there is a real tenderness there between the two of them, and I thought that was so fun to watch and so important as well to see that, and not just a little wink here, a little nudge here, seeing two men kissing, having sex. You know, I just thought that was so important because, again, Bridgerton really lacked in that department. What did you think of their relationship?
I thought it was brilliant as well. And I think also it's kind of like they're almost surrogate parents for both George and Charlotte as well. So, you know, they're both of the respective households and of those two respective royals, but they're joined in their efforts to try and make this quote unquote great experiment, but also relationship work. And they're really trying their hardest to get to the bottom of what's going on with George, making sure that Charlotte feels comfortable, but also, they love each other. And that's a glorious romance to see as well. And I think you also see flicks of that in the present day Brimley as well.
When he's dancing.
Yeah, I know.
And remembering. Did we find out what happens to Reynolds?
We don't.
Oh God.
Maybe a potential season two.
Yeah. But I loved their relationship. I loved what it brought to the show. And if there is a second season, I would love to see
I
more
would
of them.
love to see that backstory unfold a bit more. I think also something that this series really managed to tackle, as well as queer relationships and representation, is also the representation of race and conversations about race in Queen Charlotte as well. I think Bridgerton as a series has obviously been criticised in the past for not, staring race in the face as a theme, and it's
no one talks about it.
And it's kind of like a post-racial society, if you will. But I think in Queen Charlotte we're seeing that before story of Bridgerton, and part of that is talking about race and talking about stereotyping and racist attitudes that existed in that society at the time. Obviously we see when Charlotte arrives in the UK how she's treated by George's mother and how she's treated by society in general. And I think one of the more powerful scenes in the series is one of the very first in the first episode, where she walks into her wedding wearing the dress and her hair how she wanted, and not how George's mother wanted her to.
European values.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just thought it was dealt with really well throughout the entire series. It was obviously it's a fictional series, but it's using that kind of, you know, underlying, you know, racist undertones of society at that time to really drive home the message that Queen Charlotte just did not have a great time, like when she came to the UK, and not only in her love story with George, but also towards attitudes of her being the UK's first mixed race queen.
Absolutely. The wiping of her face by the Dowager Princess was grotesque, but it was all just, it was very covert, wasn't it? For example, we said with Violet Bridgerton's dad, Ledger, his wife, she wanted to say it right. She wanted to say, we knew what she was thinking when Lady Danbury was having the first ball of the season, all of that. She didn't like it because she's black, but she didn't say it. And I think it was very clever, actually, to showcase the fact that racism isn't always doing the most overt, egregious things that would make you gasp and turn away in disgust. Actually, it can be coded and secretive, but it's there. And I think the show handles that really well and chooses to explore it in that way. And I'm glad we got an explanation as to why the society we see in Bridgerton is the way it is. You know, how did that come to be? Nothing just happens out of nowhere, and I think we get an answer to that through the Great Experiment, which we said before it would have been rooted in financial benefit and alliances rather than we're moral people and we want to make a change, because as we see, there are many older members of the society who don't quite like it. They're not a fan.
No, exactly.
But that was really interesting. I think it was really important. And Shonda Rhimes, you know, I know the Bridgerton books, obviously, in existence, but this is her story. She wrote this, and I think the quality shows.
Oh, it does. I think it's such excellent storytelling. And I think one of the greatest things about the series as a whole is you're going on this love story, but there are so many other paths that the story takes and so many heartfelt, tender moments. And I think it's a world away from Bridgerton, but an excellent world away from Bridgerton.
Yeah, absolutely, and really captures what people, having important conversations whilst capturing what people love so much about the period genre, and even drawing in new fans such as myself. It's not a genre that I gravitate towards naturally, but I love this. And if there's a season 2, then we will be watching it.
Yeah, sign me up.
Well, I think that's everything.
I think it is.
I think we've run the whole gamut there. But those are our thoughts on Netflix's Queen Charlotte, which is available to stream now on Netflix. And make sure you tune in. There are just 6 episodes as well. Don't miss it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.